6 questions explain. What are the risks of a nuclear disaster in the escalating exchange of strikes between Iran and Israel? Amid the escalating war between Israel and Iran, concerns are growing that the ongoing military strikes on nuclear facilities could lead to a nuclear disaster of unknown scale and severity. Since June 13, 2025, the Israeli occupation has been carrying out extensive airstrikes and large-scale attacks targeting Iranian nuclear scientists, military commanders, and key sites and bases, including uranium enrichment facilities in Natanz and Fordo, the Isfahan reactor, and the Bushehr nuclear plant. In response, Iran has launched dozens of ballistic missiles and drones at several high-value Israeli military sites and facilities, repeatedly threatening to target Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor. Given the strategic importance of these facilities and the sensitive nuclear materials they may contain, the question arises, could Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites trigger a nuclear catastrophe or radiation leak? And what would happen if Iran succeeded in hitting Israel's Dimona reactor with a missile strike? Have nuclear sites ever been bombed in a similar way in the past? First of all, how much damage have Iran's nuclear sites sustained from Israeli strikes? Despite the intense airstrikes carried out by the Israeli Air Force since Friday, June 13, 2025, experts say that satellite imagery has not yet shown significant damage to Iran's nuclear infrastructure. According to the Washington Post, citing sources, recent Israeli attacks on the Natanz and Fordo facilities did not result in any recorded increase in radiation levels. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, stated that the electricity supply at Natanz had been disrupted, but no increase in radiation levels was detected. This is because the targeted section was above ground and housed enrichment equipment, not the reactor core, which lies underground. American nuclear expert David Albright from the Institute for Science and International Security told Agence France Presse that, in terms of visible damage, we're not seeing much. We'll have to wait and see what happens, suggesting that the Israeli strikes are still in an early phase. However, Iran's Atomic Energy Organization confirmed that the Israeli attacks had caused damage to the Natanz facility, noting that chemical and radiological contamination had been detected inside the site. Although the full extent of the damage remains unclear, the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, announced on Tuesday, June 17, that the underground portion of Natanz, which houses the centrifuges, had been directly struck. Amid the escalating war between Israel and Iran, concerns are growing that the ongoing military strikes on nuclear facilities could lead to a nuclear disaster of unknown scale and severity. Since June 13, 2025, the Israeli occupation has been carrying out extensive airstrikes and large-scale attacks targeting Iranian nuclear scientists, military commanders, and key sites and bases, including uranium enrichment facilities in Natanz and Fordo, the Isfahan reactor, and the Bushehr nuclear plant. In response, Iran has launched dozens of ballistic missiles and drones at several high-value Israeli military sites and facilities, repeatedly threatening to target Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor. Given the strategic importance of these facilities and the sensitive nuclear materials they may contain, the question arises, could Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites trigger a nuclear catastrophe or radiation leak? And what would happen if Iran succeeded in hitting Israel's Dimona reactor with a missile strike? Have nuclear sites ever been bombed in a similar way in the past? 1. Is there a real threat to Iran's nuclear facilities? Recent Israeli attacks have focused on well-known Iranian nuclear sites such as Natanz and Fordo, as well as facilities in Isfahan and Bushehr. Although the visible damage has not been entirely destructive, some reports have mentioned limited chemical and radiological contamination inside one of the sites. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that the Natanz facility was indeed damaged and experienced a power outage, a situation that could disrupt the operation of centrifuges if it continues. 2. What if Iran decides to strike Israel's Dimona reactor? Tehran has not hidden its intentions in this regard and has repeatedly threatened to target the Dimona reactor, which is believed to house a secret Israeli nuclear arsenal. If such an attack were to occur and successfully hit the facility, it could lead to a nuclear leak in the Negev, with potential consequences extending to other parts of Israel and even neighboring countries like Jordan. 3. Have similar incidents occurred elsewhere in the region? Yes. In past decades, several nuclear facilities in the Middle East have been targeted, such as Iraq's Tammuz reactor in 1981 and a Syrian reactor in Deir ez-Zor in 2007. In those cases, no significant radiation leaks were reported because the reactors were either not yet operational or lacked nuclear fuel at the time of the attack. However, the situation is different with active facilities like Natanz, Bushehr, and Dimona. 4. What are the consequences if an actual nuclear leak occurs? A nuclear leak could trigger a humanitarian and environmental disaster. Radioactive gases such as iodine and cesium can pose. What would happen if Iran successfully hit Israel's Dimona reactor? In response to Israeli strikes, Tehran has repeatedly vowed to target the Dimona reactor. Let's assume, hypothetically, that Iranian ballistic missiles with powerful warheads or cruise missiles manage to strike Dimona or its associated facilities in the Negev region. What would be the expected consequences? Direct impact? Experts say a large conventional explosion at Dimona could damage the reactor building or breach its protective containment structure, particularly the containment dome, potentially releasing radioactive gases such as radioactive oxygen, iodine, cesium, and possibly even plutonium. Such an incident would pose a serious radiological threat to southern Israel, affecting desert towns and Bedouin villages near Dimona, including places like Eilat and Beersheba. Medium to long-term consequences. Easterly winds could carry radioactive clouds toward eastern parts of the Negev and even into nearby regions of Jordan. This would likely require the evacuation of affected populations and long-term monitoring of agricultural land to ensure radiation levels remain safe. Compared to the Chernobyl disaster, the Dimona reactor is estimated to be only about 5% the size of Chernobyl's reactor, according to Israeli sources. This suggests that the health impact might be relatively less severe. One analysis found that if a disaster occurred at Dimona, the most intense radioactive fallout would likely remain confined to the immediate surroundings of the reactor, although localized high radiation zones could still appear in the air. Economically, however, the cost would be enormous. In the case of Chernobyl, the former Soviet states spent hundreds of billions of dollars to rehabilitate contaminated land and relocate 500,000 people away from radiation zones. While estimates suggest that Iranian missiles might not be able to completely destroy Israel's nuclear program, which Israel has never officially confirmed to include nuclear weapons, such an attack would still plunge the country into a major environmental and civil crisis. Ultimately, an incident of this nature could trigger a dangerous escalation, potentially activating buttons of mutual destruction between the two sides.